welcome to Neuse News. I am your host, Elizabeth Flusso. Today I'm in Neuse, North Carolina, near the Neuse River. The Neuse River was named in 1584 by Arthur Barlow, an English explorer. Barlow named the river Neuse, meaning peace, after the Neusiok Indian tribe. The Neuse River is 250 miles long, starting in Durham County, North Carolina, at the junction of the Eno and Flat Rivers, and travels all the way down to Pamlico County, North Carolina, and dumps into the Pamlico Sound. Jumping from the peace of the river to a more violent time in the history of North Carolina, we are going to join Connor at the CSS Neuse in Kinston, North Carolina, to see how the ironclad played a part in the history of the Neuse River. Connor, over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. The contract for construction of the CSS Neuse was signed on October 17, 1862, and the price was $40,000 to be paid in several installments. Less than 2 months into their work, the builders suffered a major delay when Union General John G. Foster directed a raid from New Bern inland to Goldsboro in December 1862. There was fighting at the place of construction, and the uncompleted hole was struck several times, and a Union soldier even tried, unsuccessfully, to swim the river and burn the ship. The exact date of the CSS Neuse's launch was not recorded, but it was thought to have been launched in the late summer of 1863. Oddly, it was launched before her propellers were installed, and later a dam was built around the ship downriver to install the shafts and propellers. After being floated and towed to Kinston, the CSS Neuse was moored at the current site of the King Street Bridge, which then was a deep port called the Cat Hole for completion. At the time, the South was short of iron, and poor railroads delayed shipment of armor, sometimes up to 3 weeks passing before any arrived. A dispute in April 1864 led to a few workers going on strike, but by the end of April, the CSS Neuse was functioning. She steamed out of Kinston on April 22, 1864 to take part in an attack on New Bern, but unfortunately the river was unusually low and the CSS Neuse ran aground after only half a mile. The water level dropped fast and the ship remained stuck fast until the river rose on May 19, 1864. When the ship was finally freed, much of the Confederate infantry had been moved to Virginia, preventing the ability to attack New Bern, so the Neuse remained moored until March of 1865. However, don't think that this means that the Neuse had no effect on the war. Just by being complete and ready to go in Kinston if the opportunity arose was a threat to the Union. It made them cautious before venturing along the Neuse River again on further raids. It also made them think twice before removing troops from New Bern and run the risk of not being able to defend against the Neuse. On March 11, 1865, Commander Joseph Price ordered the crew of the Neuse to fire on Federals outside of Kinston and keep them out. Later that day, the ship was set on fire and put adrift to keep it away from the Union. While burning, an explosion in the port bow caused it to sink. 3 days later, the Union captured Kinston. Salvaging of the ship started just a few days after the ship burned and sank, when some soldiers removed some guns from the ship. The ship, its machinery, and its armor plating were auctioned off after the war by the U.S. government. The cannons were taken over by them. The boiler and engines were used to power a mill from the 1870s until it was demolished in the 1930s, and the hull of the ship remained in the deep mud of the Neuse River until the 1960s. In June of 2012, the hull of the Neuse was cut in 3 sections and moved to the CSS Neuse Civil War Interpretive Center. The center was open to the public on July 18, 2013, with the Neuse collection being one of the largest for a Confederate naval vessel, featuring thousands of artifacts.
Now that we have had a look at one type of boat that was important to the Neuse River's history, let's look at another way that is a bit more peaceful, like the river's name. Matthew and Connor are going to join me as we discuss how the Neuse River was used for shipping. Welcome, guys. Connor, can you tell me some about the history of shipping in the Neuse River?
Sure. The Neuse River was vital to the growth and development of North Carolina. By the mid-1700s, New Bern, on the Neuse River, had become a vital port for all of the new colonies. It continued to serve as the primary means of transportation for area people, supplies, and crops like cotton and tobacco until the late 1800s. They also used it to ship war supplies during the Civil War. Large flat longboats were used on the Neuse River until there was a regularly scheduled steamboat service.
Wow, that's a lot of cool information about the history of shipping on the Neuse River. Knowing what I now know, I wonder if there's any shipping on the Neuse River today. Matthew, can you tell me more about shipping on the Neuse River in more modern times?
Sure. So what we saw is that through the mid-1800s, there was, really a solid history of North Carolina, of New Bern, which is a main city on the Neuse River, being one of the really big ports of the colony at the time. But mid-1800s, getting closer to the Civil War, a couple of what are accredited to be big hurricanes came through and opened up a couple of new inlets, Oregon Inlet and Hatteras Inlet, replacing the now shrinking Ocracoke Inlet directly across from the Neuse River, and really pushing a lot of the major cargo trade starting to move away from the Neuse River into the larger ports in Beaufort, Wilmington, places like that. The other thing that we were seeing is that as boats started getting bigger and bigger, the narrow sounds and shallow river, like the Neuse River, couldn't quite handle the size cargo vessels that were being needed for the shipping across to go transcontinental. But one thing that did happen is the digging of the Intercoastal Waterway Canal coming off of Adams Creek going down towards Beaufort, North Carolina, to see a lot of barge traffic still moving through the Neuse River, coming in from people around the Sound, traveling through the Neuse River to Adams Creek, and moving across to the large seaport in Beaufort, North Carolina. One of the biggest phosphate companies in the world regularly ships barges through Oriental, just outside Oriental, North Carolina, on the Neuse River, to go through to Beaufort, the March seaport. There's a couple of large boat manufacturers up the Neuse River shipping a lot of their product down the river, and really all around a lot of smaller commerce type shipping still on the river today.
That's awesome that the Neuse River has played such an important part in the history of North Carolina and continues to play an important part in our life now. We have one more important thing that happens on the Neuse River, and I don't know about you, but I enjoy a tasty fish dinner, and when I want one, I know just who to call up. Matthew, over to you.
Throughout the history of North Carolina, especially around the Neuse River, even as far back as the Native Americans and the early colonial times, fishing was a huge part of feeding people around the area because there was so much of it readily available. It was easy to get in a lot of ways because there was, at the time there was so many fish around. It was certainly a lot more important at the time for it to be fishing for food or fishing for trade than it is today, where you see a lot more of it is for sport or for more kind of specialty food or treats, almost more than it is the basic necessary food for people. So back behind me is the New Bern NC waterfront and one of the many North Carolina public boat ramps and wildlife and marine fisheries ramps that during the summer and during peak catch seasons would normally be teeming with many different commercial, recreational, as well as guide fishermen coming into North Carolina looking for whatever the catch may be. During the summer there are huge numbers of fish that travel through, and the recreational fishermen tend to come in looking for a big game fish. You see the commercial fishermen coming through looking for shrimp and other large sail fish and other sea life. There's a large amount of guides coming in, with people coming in from out of state just to go fishing along the Neuse River in North Carolina. What we see even to this day, there's an estimate that just in the directly related fishing industries, over $20 million worth of income into North Carolina per year. And what that's not including is a lot of boat sales, a lot of hotels, restaurants, and local entertainment accommodations for people who are coming in town just to go fishing or to do some fishing while they're in town.
Someday our life now will be history for other people to look back on. Let's make it good history. As you learned today, the Neuse River has seen some rough times, but has also had plenty of peaceful times, fulfilling its name's meaning. Let us go out and make good history. We will have plenty of hard times, but hopefully we can always enjoy peaceful times. I highly recommend going to see the Neuse River for yourself. The river is over 6 nautical miles across at its furthest point, 90 feet across at its narrowest point, and averages 3 miles across between the Intercoastal Waterway Channel and New Bern. It is a mighty river with lots of fun things to do. Thank you for joining us on Neuse News.